question really being, is sustainable media planning achievable or just a pipe dream? And to talk us through that, we have Emma Newman, CRO EMEA at PubMatic, and Laura Wade, VP and Head of Sustainability at Essence. Welcome, Emma and Laura.
We weren't quite sure where to sit, so we've decided to sit over here, haven't we? Yeah. Oh, God, that's a bit lower down than I thought it was going to be.
Want some water?
Yes, please. Thank you. Right. So, before we start, across the digital advertising industry, the conversation about sustainability is growing louder. The terms carbon neutral and net zero have made their way into our day-to-day vocabulary, and as a result, we are more informed, we are better equipped to understand the steps that we need to take to protect our planet. However, we are still at the beginning of the quest to decarbonise the digital advertising industry, and there is a lot of work to be done if we are to reach net zero by 2030, as pledged by AdNetZero and its members. Advertising has always been a blend of art and science, and sustainability really is a redefinition of the science component of that equation. Sustainability is about creating a thriving economy and a society for all, now and obviously in the future. And today, the digital advertising industry sits somewhat behind the curve, and there is definitely work to be done to ensure that advertising has a role in a net zero society. We need a mind shift where there is a collective feeling of responsibility throughout the supply chain. Now, my name is Emma Newman. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for PubMatic across EMEA, and I'm glad to welcome Laura Wade, VP Head of Sustainability at Essence, to join me today for this non-fireside chat about sustainability and advertising. Now, Laura was promoted to VP Head of Sustainability at Essence in 2022, having served as VP of Content and Innovation in EMEA since 2018. And in this new role, you're empowered to build and scale sustainable practices at the agency, including an industry-leading media decarbonisation strategy, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. You're also an active member of the IPA Climate Charter Steering Group, as well as Group M's Mission Zero Task Force. And, as if that's not enough, you're a non-exec trustee at the arts charity Lighthouse, connecting art, technology, science, and society. So, welcome, Laura.
Thank you.
Let's just dive right in. So, what does the topic of sustainability, or why does the topic of sustainability matter more than ever before, and what does it actually mean to you?
Yeah. I don't know about you guys, but have you been following the COP27 coverage? So yesterday I was really a bit, because we've all now publicly agreed that 1.5 is not viable. The pathways we are on, we're not going to achieve it. So I was feeling a bit flat. I did what I normally do, listen to a few podcasts, a few points of views. I was like, no, it's okay. Because now actually the urgency is so real in this decade, because every fraction matters, and that's the new phrase, every fraction matters. Because if we can keep it below 1.6, that's better than 1.7, and so on and so on. So for me, as we touched on, I think what quite a few people have touched on is the next 8 years are going to determine what life is like for all living things on the planet. And we have a choice. We have a choice about the role that we have in that. We can be the catalyst for that change, like Matthew Bourne mentioned, or we can continue to be the problem. And I think Cristina Figueres said culture is as important as politics and science. And I think that's really coming to the fore over the next year. So for me, it's now or never. And that doesn't mean, we are, it's really cliched, but we are on a journey. We're not going to solve it overnight, but we do need to commit to solving it. And how do we go about doing that? Well, I think the first step we need to take is to recognise the energy that we consume as an industry. The marketing and advertising and media industry, what energy are we taking out of the system? We're against a backdrop of an energy crisis. So why do we deserve to burn through energy without marketing and advertising? And we need to measure it, and we need to reduce it quickly. And then beyond that, we need to think about what is the role of marketing and advertising in a net zero society. And I think that's sort of the conversation that's happening right now. So yeah, is that the answer
I think
to your
you've
question?
answered that, yeah. The previous panel, and obviously conversations, it's very clear that people, not consumers, but people want to make a difference, but their value-driven concerns often don't translate into action, a phenomenon we call the value-action gap. People feel driven to do something about environmental and social issues, but don't always act on their intentions. There are many barriers that get in the way of sustainable living. Some people prefer saving money more than saving the planet when shopping, and some feel they, as a sole individual, can't actually make a difference. And some believe climate change is so far in the future that they don't feel compelled to act now. What is the role of advertising, do you think, in driving social and environmental sustainability impact? And can advertising influence sustainable behaviour?
Yes.
Oh,
No.
okay, then.
So Matthew gave a couple of examples. I think our biggest challenge, actually, is products that we are going to be promoting are changing. That'll be driven by legislation, right to repair. They're going to become more durable. The circular economy is going to be more prevalent. And therefore, we are going to be like, great, we can promote these products. Fantastic. I think our bigger challenge is how do we start crafting a vision of what success looks like that is decoupled from carbon-heavy behaviours. And I'll give you an example of this. And, the adverts have changed, actually, on the tube. I know we're talking about digital, but I normally come into Oxford Street, Oxford Circus,
yeah.
and the tunnel for the last sort of 3 or 4 weeks has been wrapped by a luxury brand. And the luxury brand, it's all like gold sort of hues, beautiful women draped on private jets. Someone had written F consumption across it. And I think that's our role. How do we start not only promoting the products and behaviours that we want to drive, but also thinking about how do we start demonstrating that a more sustainable life is one that is linked to well-being, community, values that really do make a difference versus private jets, Rolexes, luxury goods.
Less stuff, more joy, I think we said earlier.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that for us, advertising amplifies, it storytells, it educates, it normalises, all of those wonderful things. And actually the normalising potentially is the most powerful thing we can do, normalising what a good life looks like.
Now, that was about, how advertising as a message can drive behaviour. But how do we change the behaviour of the advertising industry?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, isn't it? Okay, so I think we do need to change as an industry. We need to change. And I think, actually, the Group M decarbonisation framework, I'm going to kind of borrow as an example of how we need to change. The Group M decarbonisation framework, as probably a lot of people in the room know, was created to help us measure the carbon impact of the media ecosystem. But certain characteristics of that, I hope, represent what we need to change towards. So the first thing was we looked externally. So the Group M team went to external sources, so a Big Four consultancy, and worked on this project. They also didn't create a methodology. They applied the greenhouse gas protocol framework to the advertising ecosystem. So I think we as an industry are so used to looking inward for answers, we actually need to look outwards and look to experts within sustainability and take their lead. Secondly, we've made the media decarbonisation framework open source and it's transparent. We all need to align on the fact that this challenge is pre-competitive. Like, media decarbonisation, we need to tackle as a collective. We need to align around a consistent methodology. And this is true of all of our challenges. We need to come together as a community because for our industry to survive and be relevant and welcomed in a net zero society, we now have to prove its worth, and we're only going to do that as a collective. And then thirdly, commit. That sustainability is complex, and you end up having lots of sort of wormhole situations that you go down and explore. But if you are committed to a target that is public, so a science-based target that includes media. It doesn't matter how many sort of side steps or garden paths you go down, you ultimately are committed to what you're going to achieve. And everyone's got the same intent. And I think at the moment, when we talk to our suppliers or our partners, there's not consistency in our industry. We cannot say that everyone in our supply chain has a science-based target. We can't say that everyone in our supply chain has done a carbon audit. And actually, we need to do this so that we can all be speaking with knowledge of carbon literacy, but we can all align on what we need to achieve desperately, because we can't fluff this. We need reduction so that we can look people in the face and say, not only do we have our own house in order, we've reduced it, and we are aligned in supporting and driving a net zero society.
Which sounds lovely.
What are you going to say?
But, I was a marketer, and I know that my job was to increase demand. Mm-hmm. That is central to what marketers do. So isn't that just slightly at odds with the goal of reducing environmental impact?
I think, like I said before, I think the products that are being provided are going to change, but also I think we need to start creating demand for sustainable behaviour. So I think the stat is we need consumption to go down by 70% in the UK. And I think also it's mindful. I'm very aware that we talk about citizens and all these small changes that they can make, but it's the top 10%, the affluent target audience that a lot of us target, that are driving the most emissions, and that's true globally as well. So I think we need something that, as a community, we need to explore. How do we get the most affluent people, who are the highest emitters, to change their behaviours? So I think what we need to be aware of is, we are going to see products move to be more like services, because if they last for 10, 20 years, they are going to be more about driving demand for how to refurbish them. Can you DIY and refurbish yourself? Like Fairphone is a product that lasts for 10 years. You can take it apart, you can fix it, you can change the battery yourself. One of our clients, MPB, is having massive growth. They are a circular economy business. They are refurbishing cameras and reselling those cameras. So actually the demand they need to drive is people giving them their old kit to refurbish. So demand doesn't necessarily, and growth does not necessarily have to be linked with the linear process of consumption and waste. And I think that's where we need to get a bit more clever. And again, we've got 4 principles at Essence, and one of them is, how do we challenge the status quo through innovation? Because challenging the status quo just because it's a moral imperative doesn't get you in a good place, because then you're just seen as activist or not understanding the wider context of what's happening. But if you challenge the status quo with coming up with an innovation that helps people come on a journey and go, actually, if we do that, we still see growth, but the knock-on impact is reduction in carbon or a more positive behaviour, and then everyone's winners.
I think it's that changing what good looks like.
Mm-hmm.
You talked a little bit, you said about one of your pillars, one of Essence's pillars. What are the other 3? How is your business actually driving change? And is there any sort of best practices that you could share, or maybe any obstacles that you've sort of come across along the way?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's a bit like the commit point that I made before. I think having pillars really helps people galvanise, because I'm one person in an organisation, so I can't do everything, and system change comes from everybody. So having pillars gives people the impetus and the direction to focus their energy. So our pillars are reduction and regeneration, which is really important for us, particularly regeneration over offsetting. Robust and reliable data. So we need data to help us make the right informed decisions, but also to demonstrate when we've made choices or implemented a policy or an idea that we can actually measure its impact, that it's creating the impact that we want. And I think that's the biggest challenge at the moment in our industry, is the inconsistent level of data that we have available to us. What was it? So I did the challenge the status quo through innovation. And the third one is scale. How drive in transformative scale, because it's all very well tweaking around the edges, but actually you could have 20 sort of work streams, what I do, and it's like going, actually, what 2 are going to have the biggest impact and can be scaled, not only with our business, but within Group M and the industry, because, we're behind the curve and we need to move a bit faster. And it was those 4 principles that I sort of crafted and relayed to our programmatic team when we started to design the sustainable programmatic framework. And because I am not a programmatic expert, don't tell anyone, even though I work at a digital agency. And so the four principles that I came up with, sort of, I could stay in a meeting and say, well, how does that deliver that? And it would help them go, okay, maybe it doesn't. And we'd rehash, rework.
So, you are not a lone voice, but as you said, there's one of you at the moment, and you work in a very large organisation. And those 4 principles obviously have taken a lot of thought and consideration. And it sounds as though they're sort of becoming embedded within the organisation. But, it couldn't have been plain sailing. Where did you find the pockets of resistance, and how did you overcome those?
I think it's not even pockets of resistance. I think what we all acknowledge is that the pace of people in work is quite full on. So you're trying to get people to put time aside in their day to think rather than just continually doing. So it's carving out space. So I created like climate action sessions and just invited people to come, but also made it really clear that you didn't have to be really drinking the Kool-Aid on sustainability. It was like, everyone's welcome to this session and bring your challenges, which has been really useful. And it's always the thing, isn't it? Here, you want to hear from your biggest detractors or people that have the biggest challenges that are contradictory to your beliefs, because that will be where you find solutions. And I think trying not to polarize people and bring people along on that journey. I think that's the biggest thing. And also, it's really difficult because it's a topic that nobody disagrees with. Like DEI, everyone agrees. You go into a meeting and everyone's like, yeah, we absolutely, want a planet that not only we can live on, but we can thrive on. And it is fair that there's people that can thrive all over the world and all of those things. But then they leave the meeting room and they go back to their spreadsheets, their targets, etc. So I think the biggest challenge is the systems change that is required. And I think we've talked a lot about consumers making the small changes, but fundamentally I do feel like business, industry, and governments are where the system change needs to be accelerated, because consumers want it to happen. They just need us to make it as convenient as possible. And I think last week, GlobeScan came out with a report, and they've done a survey of 30,000 people globally, and 68% said that they would be willing to halve consumption if it meant that a significant reduction in environmental damage and climate change. So the desire is there. We just need to, advertising is all about context, and we need to read the room and realise the context that we're operating in and drive that change.
You said, you get everybody together. No one can argue that this is not an imperative. No one's going to say, actually, no, I don't want to be involved in that. And everybody gets excited, and then they go back to their desk and they open their inbox, and, Armageddon has probably broken loose in that half an hour that they've been in a room with you.
Yeah.
But one of the things that keep people motivated, obviously, is to see progress and see success. What kind of targets have you set yourselves, and how are you measuring that success? And then, how are you communicating that down to your teams, and is that a motivating factor?
Well, again, I feel like net zero is table stakes, and net zero media plans by 2030 is what Group M have committed to. So I think actually what motivates people is seeing that translate into action and understanding that those targets are being delivered against. So, for example, I think that's because I've only been in my role sort of 9 months. That's why at the beginning in January, it was really clear that I had to focus on one project that was a proof point, which is programmatic. And then you go, well, okay, like programmatic is deemed the most efficient media channel, but actually it's the most inefficient when it comes to carbon. And there's a lot of data waste, and there's a lot of data vanity in there. So actually having a tangible project to share with people within, not only within Essence, but within the industry has been really valuable, because suddenly people get it. They go, oh, okay, so I can apply this to my day job, and actually we've got permission to explore and come up with different models that can really galvanise people. And I think the sustainable programmatic framework, that the point of that is reduction first rather than offsetting, But also, we can only achieve it if we collaborate and we are transparent with the data that we're using with the partners, so the publishers and the domains that we operate with. So again, I think it's been really refreshing for publishers to feel like they're not going to be penalised, or we're not going to come up with something and give it to them and say, now you have to do this. We've invited them into the room, we've shared our ambition, we've shared our pillars, and we've worked with publishers and shared the data with them, so that we've got to a point now that we have a sustainable programmatic framework that everyone's getting quite excited about, because we're looking at carbon adjusted CPMs, but also it's taking that holistic view. It's how can we create good behaviours that are carbon reductive, but also think about what behaviours are we encouraging in citizens as well. Are we encouraging them to view more ads? Are we forcing them to watch ads because they're not skippable? Like how does that fit in the framework? And you start to have these conversations that, to begin with, feel quite awkward with people because we've got lots of best practices that exist in the industry. But actually, this is the conversations we need to be having.
And how have the publishers responded?
Yeah, I think I think, you know what, again, there's such inconsistency at the moment in terms of the journeys that everyone's on, but I think they get it. I think they realise once we've taken them through what our ambition is and our commitment to net zero, it's being received much better than, is this just a way to put another tax on us?
Yeah.
Is this another way to force us to do something or carry the can or take full responsibility? Because I think the other thing about sustainability is we are all interdependent on each other. We're all part of this great ecosystem. So we all need to listen to each other. We all need to collaborate. And I think once you start to demonstrate those values, it's being received really positively. But it also means we're having quite awkward conversations around, you know, our criteria for our marketplace is, do you have a net zero target? Are you willing to be part of a regeneration fund? But also, what is your editorial commitment to climate misinformation? And that third point is a hot potato.
Yeah. Because then you've got the sort of the advertising teams and the editorial teams kind of clashing a little bit, right? And then you've got the editorial team saying, well, hang on a minute, whose tail's wagging the dog here, sort of thing. Let's go to the other end of the supply chain and just talk briefly about the brands that you're working with. So obviously, you know, I've been to had a lot of conversations, and you know, the brands are saying that they want the agents, they want us to do more, right? They're pushing the agencies to do more. I'd be interested to see or understand how your brands have been responding to the work that you've been doing.
Yeah, good, because I think, good. Look, again, we're all figuring this all out together, and I think what's interesting is a lot of brands have had sustainable development goals for quite some time, but they sometimes haven't translated into their marketing. There's different commitments in terms of science-based targets, and there's different positions on the route to decarbonisation, sort of offsetting, etc. But again, I think the general consensus that we have is that clients are excited about this, and I think that's refreshing, because like I said, at the top of this, you can feel really deflated and feel like we're pushing water up a hill, but actually, we are in a really exciting time. So I reckon we've got 12 to 18 months where we've got a bit of leeway to be curious, explore, and challenge, and create hypotheses and test. And then I think the consumer is going to start to scrutinise way more intensely our energy consumption as an industry, our role in society. I think we've got a little bit of leeway. So actually at the moment, it's about how do we work with brands and come up with solutions that help deliver KPIs, but also create this sort of carbon metric as well, which is really important. And it's like with the data that we have, as an example, is we can do a carbon emission audit for our clients now and show them that, you know, you plot a graph of the domains that they're buying against programmatically, and that one quadrant is high carbon emitters but low campaign KPI performers. So suddenly you go, hey, we can...
Why are you even doing
let's
that?
cut those.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing is sometimes you cut sort of less than 10%, and you automatically reduce by carbon footprint by like 23, 25%. Again, caveat, we're still testing the data, we're still, you know, but these are the things that we are testing and learning against. And it's not about more high polluting domains coming into the fold, we just raise the floor price. And I think another really interesting thing is you start to discover stuff. So there's a lot about putting advertising against sustainable content. But some of these websites that are being created for sustainable content have been created for advertising dollars. So they have quite a lot of ad tech sitting behind them because they're trying to get the long tail. So suddenly you have sustainable content websites that are really carbon heavy. So just having data enables you to have such brilliantly interesting and informed conversations. You don't necessarily have the answers, but it definitely sparks the conversation and the questions to work more collaboratively with our clients.
And do you think that, brands are willing to pay more for that sort of campaign? Because we often get, you hear about the pushback, which is, well, I need more scale, so if I go down that sustainability route, I'm not going to get the scale I need. Or, if I go down the sustainability route, then the cost of my advertising is going to increase. How do we balance that, do you think?
Yeah, so I think, again, it's all interdependent. So to give you an example, our sustainable marketplace is, on average, 33% lower than the sort of average domain, because we've done that filter. What we can say is potentially to publishers is, let's look at a shared cost. Who covers the regenerative fund? All of us, maybe. Or we all contribute to that. So clients, us, publishers. And then you go, well, it's about how do we drive systems change? How do we incentivize? How do we reward those publishers that have decarbonised, that are ensuring that they are adhering to climate misinformation policies and guidelines? And actually, as you see that switch of spend, that incentive for publishers is there to make sure that it's cost effective. I think, again, it depends on what the model is. I think, and again, it's about joining marketeers with the sustainability team, because saving money on your marketing but driving up your carbon emissions in the long run doesn't equal profits, particularly if it's being scrutinised by shareholders and investors. But I think at the moment we're still joining the dots and trying to create a much more macro vision, and we can only do that by partnering with our clients and understanding their pressures and their stakeholders.
There's also an argument to say, what does good growth look like? There's a lot of debate about whether GDP is actually a mechanism to monitor good growth. Is that what we should be looking at now moving forward? And maybe there's an argument to look at that for advertising as well. Two very quick questions before we finish. What's your dream project to move the needle? And what's the one piece of advice you'd give to any organisation about combining advertising and sustainability?
Yeah. Okay, so dream project. The thing that makes me feel a little bit sad is how divisive and, how potentially we're creating quite an intolerant society with the content that we create. And actually, I think we need to come together to solve this. And so it would definitely be something around a project where you're looking at climate misinformation. And, shout out to ACT Labs and people like that, because I find it really useful to have that data available to me to have a really tangible conversation about what is climate misinformation. We're not talking about climate denial anymore. Everyone's on board. 100% of the scientists agree that haven't been funded by lobbyists. But it's more about climate delay from narratives that are divisive, that pair the cost of living against the cost of transition. That is climate misinformation, in my opinion, because we know the facts are there that this isn't the case. So even though I suppose it's not about media decarbonisation, which is a brilliant project, by the way, I think my heart would be something that, about how we are a force for good in society with our media investments.
Yeah, how do we fund responsible journalism?
Yeah, exactly.
Basically.
Which is part of our better framework, but I'd like to take it up a notch and make it not something that just sits in Group M, but something that we could get behind as an industry.
Brilliant. One tip for people on how to combine the two?
Combine two.
Advertising and sustainability?
Oh.
Just leave the really difficult one till the end.
One tip. I just think be curious, ask the questions. It's okay to be cynical if you're being cynical with good intent, and let's raise the standards. Like I say, this should be an exciting time. We've got literally the worst, I was going to say we've got nothing to lose. We've got everything to lose, so we might as well go hard or go home. Let's challenge, let's try and shift the dial in the next 12 months.
Perfect. Thank you so much. This has definitely raised the bar of the conversation. I much appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Emma and Laura, for a brilliant non-fireside chat. That was so wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.